Diffusion. What is diffusion? If you ever played with those ink pens, and if you ever as a child had that ink sprayed on your cloth, it was a very horrible thing to have happened, because now you have to put your clothes to wash. However, if you ever decided to take a glass full of water, a transparent glass, and had water in it and allowed some of the ink to go through it, you would quickly see how it would suddenly start to branch out from the point where it drops in the water, and eventually it would spread out over all the body of water. And that is diffusion. That is our solute, the ink in this case, where we have the solvent water, our solute diffusing out from a region of very high concentration to low concentration regions until the concentration is the same everywhere and we have a homogeneous solution. Basically, diffusion is that. And diffusion doesn't necessarily need liquids, but it can also happen with gases. Gases diffuse into one another. And so the content of any small volume of air in one location is the same as some other location, as long as the air is allowed to diffuse out and the two locations are thereby connected through space. Now, there is the diffusion of the solute particles, which is what is commonly understood to be diffusion, because generally speaking it's the solute which is introduced into a solvent. The solute particles are generally larger than the solvent particles. However, there is a situation where it's the solvent which will diffuse out from a region of its high concentration to another region of low concentration of the solvent. That happens when we have something called a semi-permeable membrane. A semi-permeable membrane allows solvent but not solute to diffuse from one location or one side to another. Now here is an example of how that happens, and this particular kind of a diffusion where it's the solvent which moves from a location of high concentration to a location of low concentration is called osmosis. On the right in this slide you see that there are two containers, and in those two containers on the left side we have a membrane that's dividing the the components into two halves. Those two halves cannot just pass into each other, but over time something happens. Now this is a semi-permeable membrane. Semi-permeable means it's partially or selectively going to allow small particles to flow through it. And since solvent particles are smaller than solute particles, what happens is the concentration of the solvent is higher on the B portion of this container, of this beaker. And then over time, a lot of the B side water moves into the A side water. Initially at the start, we have the equal volume of both sides, as you see in the top. But as time progresses, you will notice that the volume on the B side drops and it rises on the A side. What has happened is our semi-permeable membrane allowed water to flow through it and move to the other side. And that is osmosis. Now here is another example, dialysis bag. Anybody who takes care of a patient whose kidneys are failing or have failed may be aware of taking the patient for dialysis many times a week. Basically, dialysis is the removal of all the excretory liquid from the body by using a dialysis bag. Dialysis bag is a semi-permeable bag, and this bag would allow water to flow in but will not allow the solutes to flow out, thereby filling it up with higher volume. If you have a Ziploc bag at home and you decide to do this kind of experiment, With Ziploc bags, it will not work. If you, for example, if you have a large Ziploc bag and you fill it up with water, and inside that you fill it up with a smaller Ziploc bag that contains a solution of water and salt. Well, if it was a semi-permeable bag, then you would notice that the inner bag would increase in volume and the outer bag would go down in volume. However, it's not a semi-permeable bag, so it doesn't happen. But you may have noticed this sort of osmosis happen to the human body as well. If you take a bath in water, in a tub full of water, you may notice that your fingers and your extremities and your skin in general looks more crumbly, more wrinkly after the bath. That's the water from your body leaving and entering inside the tub. So the concentration of water is higher inside than outside, and that's why this happens. Similarly, when you have a plant that is wilting and has been out for a while outside of some water, when you put it inside a source of water, you see that in a few minutes it starts to become firmer. That's water being drawn inside because the concentration of water is lower inside the plant than outside. So those are some examples of osmosis, which is diffusion of the solvent particles from a region of high concentration to a region of low concentration. In the next video, we are going to apply osmosis to something called osmotic pressure, and we will calculate something called osmolarity.